In everyday life, we are constantly witnessing animals in motion. The neighbor's cat wandering around the street, a flock of geese migrating overhead, bees flying from flower to flower, and so on. But have you ever wondered how these animals know where they're going? Animals need to move around in their environment for a number of reasons, and different species use different ways to show how to get around. In this video, you'll be introduced to the topic of animal navigation and see some examples of the different cues and adaptations animals use to navigate in their environment. After watching this video, you should be able to 1. Explain why animals need to be able to move around and navigate. 2. Understand the difference between orientation and navigation. 3. Define cue and give examples of cues animals use to navigate. And 4. Define adaptation and give examples of adaptations animals have acquired to navigate. Let's begin thinking about animal navigation by reflecting on ourselves. Why do we, as humans, need to be able to move around to live? First, we need to move around to obtain food, water, and other essential resources. Therefore, we should know how to get to places, such as the grocery store, in order to fuel ourselves. We also need to be able to return home for shelter and protection. Finally, humans are social animals, so we need to move around to receive help from others. Now, let's shift to thinking about other animals. Why do animals need to move around in their environment? Many of the reasons why humans must navigate to survive coincide with other animals' needs. Animals must move around to find food and water, as well as to find a mate to reproduce. Sometimes, animals need to move to a better habitat in terms of better resources, less competition, less predation, or other factors. Animal dispersal is when individuals move to a different location from which they were born to increase their survivability and fitness. Animals may also migrate, which is the regular, seasonal movement of the majority of the population to a secondary habitat. Additionally, animals need to be able to return to their home territory after leaving it, which is termed homing. So far, we have been tossing around the word navigation pretty casually. It is important we understand its meaning in terms of behavioral ecology. But first, let's define orientation in the context of animal behavior. What is orientation? Orientation is a process of determining one's position in space and maintaining a proper direction. In other words, orientation is knowing where you are relative to other things in your environment. There are two types of orientation, kinesis and taxis. Kinesis is a short-range and undirected movement in response to a stimulus. For example, roly-poly bugs require a humid environment to survive. However, they cannot sense humidity. Therefore, these isopods randomly move around in their environment, hoping to find a moist spot. Unlike kinesis, where animal movements are not directed towards a target, taxis is guided, short-range movement towards or away from a stimulus. For example, many fish use the direction of the water flow to position themselves against the current, so they may maintain their position and aren't pushed downstream. Now that we have defined orientation, let's talk about navigation. What is navigation in the context of animal behavior? Navigation is a process of determining a particular location and moving towards it. Referring back to our human example, traveling from your house to the grocery store meets the requirements of navigation. You identify the store as a target location, and you use certain factors to guide yourself there. So, how do animals know to get where they want to go? How do bees know how to find their way back to their hive after foraging for nectar? How do geese know which direction they should fly when migrating? Animals use a variety of navigational cues to direct their movement, but what exactly is a cue? A cue is any biotic or abiotic factor that provides information to an organism and elicits a learned response. In the case of navigation, the response is the directed movement of the animal. So thinking about humans again, what are some cues we use to navigate? For example, if you're trying to get to the grocery store, what cues would you use to get there? Well, if you're familiar with the area, you could use your knowledge of landmarks to navigate to the store. By forming a cognitive map, which is a representation of the landscape in your brain, you can visualize a path from your location to the store. Or you could use a GPS, which gives your exact position and the route to the store. You could also use a physical map, which gives an outline of a certain area. Other animals have a diverse set of abilities to sense cues other than what humans can detect and use to navigate. What are some of the cues animals use to navigate in their environment? Like humans, many other animals can combine their knowledge of landmarks and capacity for memory to create a cognitive map in their brains that allows them to navigate within the confines of their mental map. Many species use the position of the sun or the stars to determine the direction they want to go. Navigational cues are certainly not limited to visual signals. Some animals sense the Earth's magnetic field to navigate. Other animals emit high-frequency sounds and detect the returning sound waves, a process called echolocation, to navigate in their environment. Some animals produce and sense external electric fields as a way to visualize and navigate across the landscape. Still, other animals use their sense of smell to detect chemicals in their environment as a way to determine the direction they want to travel. Many animals use a combination of these cues to navigate, depending on the constraints of their particular environment and their sensory capabilities. Now that we have talked about many of the cues animals use to navigate, how do they sense and interpret these cues to get directional information from them? Animals have developed a variety of adaptations that enable them to use these cues to navigate. So, what is an adaptation, and what are some adaptations animals have developed to navigate? An adaptation is a trait that increases an individual's fitness, which is the sum of its survival and reproductive success. We will focus on two types of adaptations when studying animal navigation: behavior and structural adaptations. A behavioral adaptation is a change in activity that increases fitness, such as geese migrating away from the poles in the colder months. A structural adaptation is a change in an individual's physiology that increases its fitness, such as magnetic sensors in birds that allow them to detect the Earth's magnetic field and use that to direct their migration towards the equator. There are many different adaptations animals have evolved that they use to navigate. Let's go over a few examples of these adaptations now. As we just saw, many birds have magnetic sensors that detect magnetically sensitive photopigments so they can visualize the Earth's magnetic field. This adaptation allows birds to essentially see north, south, east, and west and use the cardinal directions to navigate. This adaptation is especially important for birds' long-distance migrations. Other animals, such as bats, use sound waves to navigate. Bats have adaptations in their vocal cords and larynx to produce high-frequency sound for echolocation. They also have evolved sensitive ears to detect the returning sound waves. Some fish use echolocation to navigate. They have specialized muscles that, when contracted, can generate a passive internal electric field which they use to detect other objects and determine their position. Elasmobranchs, a subclass of a cartilaginous fish, which includes many shark species, have evolved specialized electroreceptor organs that detect electric fields and are used to navigate as well as track down prey. It is essential to an animal's survival that they are able to successfully navigate in their environment, whether it be short-distance movements or migrations over thousands of miles. We have seen many examples of how species use a multitude of navigational cues to get to where they need to be. The diversity of environments results in certain navigational cues being more accessible and informative to animals in some landscapes more than others. As you continue to learn about animal navigation, think about how environmental factors impact the way animals interpret and navigate the world around them.